Good evening, Rabbi Isai. Let's continue our study of Brachos Daf Dalid, and I want to dedicate today's learning to the memory of Bela Bas Yosef, Isabel Kurtz, the mother of Betty Seisner, who's remembering her yahrzeit today. And may our learning be a zechus for her neshama and for all those connected to her in life. So we're discussing this teaching in the Talmud that says that a person who says Tehillim 145, Tehillah David, Ashrei, essentially, 3 times a day, is promised to be of the world to come, promised to be in paradise. And the Talmud discussed what the meaning of that is. And I want to look at some more aspects of that teaching. We talked yesterday about the idea of how that Mizmor, that psalm, has 2 components. One is the order of Aleph Beis, the Hebrew alphabet, which represents, in a larger sense, in a symbolic sense, it represents the idea of Torah, the transmission of authentic tradition. And the other side is Poseach es Yadecha, the idea that it mentions God's providing for all of creation. P.S. Another reason why the Hebrew alphabet, the Aleph Beis, represents Torah, and specifically tradition, is because the alphabet is the only component, or I wouldn't say the only component, is the most fundamental component of learning that requires a teacher. Meaning, this is the famous story of the heretic who came to Hillel, and he said, "Teach me the whole Torah on condition that you only teach me the written Torah and not the oral tradition." So Hillel said, "No problem. But first, in order to learn the written tradition, you have to learn how to read." So on the first day, he taught him Aleph is silent, Beis it makes the B sound, Gimel. He taught him the Aleph Beis, in order. He said, "Now go practice. Come back tomorrow, and I'll test you if you know it." And he came and he said, "Okay, let's hear." And he says, "Aleph is silent." And he says, No, that's tough. Beis, he says, No, that's Shin. And so he told him, but he said, "Yesterday you told me that this is Aleph, and today you're telling me it's tough." He said, "Yes, and yesterday you believed me. You trusted me when I told you that an Aleph is an Aleph." Meaning, even in the written text, even something so fundamental as to be able to read the written text requires an oral tradition. So the Aleph Beis is kind of, I think, a symbol for this factor of Torah that is the authentic transmission of tradition. And but yesterday, going back to the theme, yesterday we talked about this idea that there's this idea that we have, on the one hand, which represents the human pursuit of connection with God, with the spiritual and with the tradition, with the religious experience, and the other side represents the human experience and God's presence in the human experience. And spiritual wellness and physical wellness, seeing them both as joint, as 2 sides of the same coin in pursuing our divinely ordained mission. And I want to talk today about some more elements of this. First of all, the idea that we don't start Tehillah David. In our daily service, we don't say Psalm 145. We start first with the words Ashrei Yoshvei Veisecha. And then after saying that verse, we go to Tehillah David, to Psalm 145. So the question is why? So perhaps this is really telling us the correct way to approach our reciting of this Mizmor. The Mizmor, the prayer that we're supposed to say, the meditation that we're supposed to have is 145. The words Ashrei are helping us to center ourselves. Before we start rattling off the words, it says, no. Ashrei Yoshvei Veisecha. Praiseworthy are those who sit in your house. Od Yahalilu Chasela, they will continue to praise you. Ashrei ha'am shekachalo, Ashrei ha'am she'Hashem Elokov. Praised is the nation that this is their portion. Praised is the nation that God is their God. And perhaps what we're doing here is we're preparing ourselves to say, don't just say these words. Recognize that you have to sit with these words. You have to meditate on them. It's interesting, by the way, that there are two components to our daily service. There is tefillah and tehillah, praise and prayer. Our praise is recited sitting. Our prayer is recited standing. And so the Amida, right, the Shemona Esrei, is a prayer. It's recited directly to God. It's our giving, it's our expression of our personal experience to God, or our request of God. We'll go into what that means later, and the Gemara is going to go more into it. But the praise is supposed to be a meditation. When we say the praise, we're not saying it to God, we're saying it to ourselves. We're trying to inculcate in ourselves an awareness of where God is in our life, and what God is to us, and what God is at all. And what matters there is that we are really focusing on getting the point. And actually, in modern meditation practice, it used to be in the olden days that when people would meditate, they were makbid that they have to sit in the lotus position. They had to hold their fingers a certain way. You remember these days? Yeah, this was a thing. Today, in the modern meditation movement or mindfulness, they tell you, just sit in the most comfortable position possible. Obviously, if you lie down, you'll fall asleep, right? So you want to sit, but in a comfortable position. The idea is that you really need to be present with the idea. You need to have the comfort. You need to be settled with it. You need to be able to push other things out. And what matters not so much is how you present it, but how you get it. Whereas, when it comes to the Amida, it's not so much about what I get, it's about what I'm presenting as I... The difference really is, in the prayer, I'm experiencing myself actually in the presence of God in this moment. Whereas in praise, I'm really reflecting on my life experience. And so the process of reflection is sitting, whereas prayer, is standing. Ashrei yoshvei veisecha, those who sit in your house. And so it's telling us again that this should be a mindfulness practice, it should be a meditative practice, and that's, in a sense, answering the question, how can somebody just saying Psalm 145, just saying Ashrei, be promised that they are ben olam haba, that they live in paradise? It's because first, it's really because first you say Ashrei yoshvei veisecha, that you're sitting with this thought. And it also explains the idea of why I'm saying it 3 times a day, why saying it 3 times a day is so important. And actually, in doing some research, I found that there are other versions of this Talmudic text that just say whoever says it every day. But the authorized version is to say it 3 times a day. And the idea of saying something 3 times a day is the difference between knowing that something exists and really trying to make it a part of my experience, make it part of my conscious awareness, that it should be something that I'm constantly aware of, not just something that I know exists. And so, you could say, I heard this one already, right? But that's not good enough. That you know it exists is not good enough. What matters is that you're really kind of repeating it and going over and over it so that it becomes kind of a habit. It becomes our reflexive reaction is this ordering our priorities in knowing that my mission in life is to be a Torah Jew, to be somebody who manifests fully the accurate transmission of tradition on the one hand, And on the other hand, that I am aware of the presence of Hashem, the presence of God in every aspect of my life. And this brings me to the last point, which is a difference between Hallel HaGadol, which the Talmud suggested might be a good alternative, or maybe even a better alternative, to the Ashrei that we say. Hallel HaGadol, the Talmud said we should say because D'chsiv bein nosein lechem l'chol basar, who gives bread to all flesh. Whereas in our prayer, Ashrei, we say poseach es yadecha umasbiah l'chol chai ratzon. You open up your hand and you give to every living thing. So, what's the difference between nosein lechem l'chol basar and poseach es yadecha umasbiah? Giving bread to all flesh and opening up your hand and providing. So, yeah. Good. So what's the difference? No saying lechem l'chol basar. So lechem refers specifically to a certain kind of food. It refers to bread. You give bread to all flesh, right? And this kind of, in a way, qualifies what divine providing looks like. Bread, by the way, is processed food. And in a way, it's kind of the finished product. It's ready to eat. And it says, God, you provide bread for all flesh. In a sense, there is that, but that denotes the kind of experiences that we have, that we experience as bread. The experiences that we have that feel like God gave us something that we can understand. L'chu lachmu b'lachmi refers to Torah. Kol hatoim tam dogon can say Shem Abba. The idea of something that I can grasp, something that I can understand, something that makes sense to me. The association with bread and wisdom in Kabbalistic literature. Whereas Poseach Es Yodecha says, actually, everything is provided for by you. And it says, there are many things, God, that you have done that I may not understand, but you are always providing. And it teaches us, meaning we have this habit of saying Baruch Hashem when something works out. Thank God when we see a miracle. Poseach es yadecha umasbiah l'chol chai ratzon means every single living thing, even the person on their worst day. Poseach es yadecha. In that moment, God is providing everything they have for them. And it teaches us to really train ourselves. And this, by the way, is a key. It doesn't say do it. It doesn't say do it. Because maybe it's not something that we can demand from everyone to be able to experience. But he says, if you can do it. If you can see that Hashem is providing to every living thing, even on what looks to me to be the worst day in the world, that Hashem is providing to every living thing, then you're living in paradise. That awareness that Hashem is my shepherd at all time, and whatever I'm experiencing is Hashem posech es yadecha, is holding me and providing me and carrying me and giving me what I need, that is heaven on earth.